Hey, come in. We haven't started yet. You're still on time. Okay, everyone else, you're late. You fucked up. Thank you so much for coming back with your full tummies and your big hearts. You are in Toronto 1. If you think you should be somewhere else, you're wrong. This is where you should be. I'm very excited. I have a great panel here to do this second episode of No Gods, No Heroes. On the right, we have Chris Blackwood from NASA joining us again. In the center, Mr. Doob and Ms. Sarah Simon, who spoke this morning. Let's hear it for them. Thank you. I'm Kim Alpert, your host. I've been here for this whole time. You'll remember me from such places as your morning. And yesterday morning. And all of your mornings. I'll be in your house waking you up every day for the rest of your life. So we had some fun yesterday talking with folks, and one of the first things we talked about was education. I think that's such a great topic. You know, some of our folks are in school, some of them are past university, but I think especially because our industry changes so rapidly, you know, how you kind of decided if and when you went to school, and if this was what you studied. You know, Chris, if you want to start us off.
It's good to start on a low point. So I have no education. I'm getting it now. I started school a couple of years ago, and I'm working on a psychology degree with my daughter.
Awesome. Mr. Du, that's not too dissimilar.
I thought you were going to ask the question. Anyway.
That's why I did ask that question.
I didn't go to school either. Well, I have like basic school, like primary school. My tutors, when I was kind of planning to go to university, my tutor asked me what I wanted to do, and I was not too sure what I wanted to do. And I was good at computers, so what I was saying, like, I guess I'm going to go to computer university, CS degree, or something like that. And she basically said, like, why are you going to go there? Are you going to go there to teach them to, you know, the math or teaching the subject? And somehow it just made me feel that the things that I was doing on my side, like at home, is what I was learning more than not at school. Like I was more into this whole demoscene culture, where is all the things that I was learning for doing like 3D and like design and all those things. I was learning it more from that than not from school. So I decided to stop studying. And what I'm doing nowadays, which is more like open source stuff, there is no school that I know of that will teach you these kind of things. So it helped me to go with what I thought was interesting, and I will learn on myself to do those things. Yeah, that
cool.
was my.
Well, Sarah, you're the odd man out a little bit.
I have a much more traditional educational path, although depending on who you ask, whether it's related to what I do now, maybe yes. I think yes. Some people would say no. So I went to an arts high school, and I studied creative writing, and then I went to a liberal arts college, and I studied English. And then first job looking for a job with an English degree was challenging, and I was really just applying all over the place and figured, will anybody pay me? I will take anything. I landed at a software company, a software consultancy, and I was doing their communications, and I was there for about a year. I was the only non-developer, non-designer at the company, and basically, long story short, what I was doing was fine. The joke was that I programmed in Microsoft Word because like everybody else was writing code and I was writing words. And long story short, I got to see what the developers were doing, and I thought, that sounds interesting. I wonder if I could do that too. And it got to a point after enough evenings and weekends of trying to teach myself that I knew I wanted to go back to school. So I went to a coding boot camp, and I was at the Turing School in Denver. It's an 8-month program. I did a lot of research to find a coding boot camp because there are a lot out there, and it's a pretty predatory field. There are a lot of these for-profit schools that you don't really know what you're getting into. They might make a job guarantee, but what does that mean? What kind of job at what kind of company for how long? So the Turing School that I found, they had a salary guarantee at the time. They said, we guarantee you X numbers of dollars within 3 months of graduation or your full tuition back. So I thought, this is a risk, but it's not that much of a risk if they're guaranteeing that they're going to give me my full tuition back if I don't make the salary. Long story short, I went back to school, I learned to code, I got my first web developer job out of that boot camp, and the rest is history.
And you've had some pretty interesting jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I think is really fascinating. You know, a lot of times we come to a conference and we talk about like the now job, right? Like the thing that we're doing now. And you worked in a tea company in Beijing, right?
Yeah, it was a summer position, so I don't know, like, don't talk about it too much because it was just a 3-month thing. But yeah, I worked for a tea company in Beijing. I was doing their like communications. Again, this was immediately after I graduated from college the first summer, and then I took that again the communications role in at the software consultancy in Minneapolis. After the boot camp, I was at a public radio station, Vermont Public Radio, and then now I'm a software engineer at the New York Times.
That's a lot of different stuff. That's a lot of. Have you guys had any kind of like different divergent jobs? Mr. Dube, have you ever had like a regular job?
No, like everything is. Well, I did some carpentry maybe one day, helping a friend when I was moving to London.
What kind of carpentry?
We were building a side house for a kindergarten or something. It was very minimal.
Okay.
Not for me.
Like a shed,
but,
a side house. Yeah. Okay, cool.
But
I'm not familiar with side house. That's a very classy, that's a very classy European shed.
But it's always been like designer, developer. I was switching jobs.
Okay.
But always doing web-related stuff.
What about you, Chris? Always tech?
Oh, I've had the jobs.
You had some weird ones?
My first career was as a magician's assistant.
You guys.
I kid you not. I was cut in half.
No, that was my next question.
And I turned into a tiger and all kinds of cool stuff. So after that, actually during that, because that does not pay the bills, you guys. It's awesome, but it's not. You're not going to get rich. I was also selling Kirby's and selling advertising. And actually selling advertising, I realized I belonged designing because I wanted to design the ads I sold. I didn't want to just sell it to people. I wanted to be like, okay, let's sketch it out together.
What is selling advertising?
So when you have a print or even a digital media, there are people who go out and sell the banners that are on the sides and stuff like that. There's people that their whole job is getting other companies to pay for that space, and that was me. I was that vermin. I'm so sorry, you guys.
Yeah, the world of media. That's like a whole other conference, right? That's like
it's a different world.
That's like the dark side.
Yeah.
Compared to us, right? Like just the pipeline, the dark side.
It is happening behind there. Yeah.
It's on the other side of this curtain. Like we pull up a thing, we all like spin, a different panel comes out, really confused. So it's interesting that magician's assistant. I have so many follow-up questions that aren't appropriate for this panel. That's really fascinating, and I'm gonna need to see photos.
They're out there.
I'm sure. It's interesting that you had such a kind of divergent beginning because you really grew up with technology, and I think that's one of the things I'm curious about too. Is how much technology did you have as like a young person that you think influenced you? You can start. I mean, you talk a bit about the Commodore, which is that's a very specific way to get started.
Yeah, my dad gave me a Radio Shack MC10 for my 8th birthday, and it didn't have software. It was just like a brick with a keyboard on it, and there's no hard drive, and there's no software, and you have to write the software. It came with a book. And so at 8, I learned to write BASIC so that I could make the Kaleidoscope program, and I could do like a choose-your-own-adventure story that I made up. And then from there, I upgraded to the Commodore something, and then later it was a Commodore 64, but I started with the Commodore, lower number. It might have been a VIC-20, yeah. And from there, it was just like, phew, I'm never looking back. Because color, you guys. Color.
Yeah.
That's square pixels.
Dude, was there a lot of technology in your house?
Not at the beginning. My father didn't want us to buy a computer. We wanted a computer, but he feared that the computer was going to absorb us or something. So I have a brother, and my brother was the one that is older, and he wanted a computer for school, and he was more interested in programming, and he is actually the programmer in the family. I'm just the designer of the family.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
He does proper program. He understands other people's code and port them to platforms and stuff like that. I'm just a designer that is building his own tools, kind of. But don't make me read other people's code.
Is your father bummed that both of you wound up being such nerds?
Yeah, well, he's into banking, and he wanted us to do banking too, wow. I guess. But he's learning computers a little bit to understand what we were doing, kind of. But I think
That's really sweet.
yeah. He created an Instagram account yesterday, and he's trying all this stuff.
That's really fun. Is he like Papa Doob? Like, is it?
He should. He should.
He
yeah.
should. That'd be so fun.
But yeah, it was mainly thanks to my brother that we managed to get a computer and convince our parents that my mother, though she was more into computers, she was she was kind of an analyzer, like at the time with the punching cards, she will analyze if the code is correct or not. Like she will like make sure that there are no bugs in the cards. So she was kind of more like into computers, so she was more open to that. But my brother wanted to a computer, and then thanks to that, and I had a computer around, and I was seeing him doing his stuff, and I follow him a little bit. But yeah.
That's awesome. About how old are we talking? That computer came in the house.
Probably 8 years old or something like that, or like maybe younger,
Okay.
like around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a spongy brain time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Sarah?
We had a computer in the house growing up, but my parents are not technical, and I have an older brother too. And my only memories of the computer in the house growing up were Roller Coaster Tycoon and the Oregon Trail. But I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon, so like you all were playing the Oregon Trail on the computer, like I was out reenacting the Oregon Trail.
Oh my God. How many oxen did you kill?
I did not die. That's good, right? Like I'm still here.
No typhoid.
But really, computers were never something that I thought I would ever be doing for a living. I was very scared by technology, and I even got, like, when I showed up to my coding boot camp, like I had no idea what a text editor was, and I was like, really, I can't use Microsoft Word? Like that's a text editor when you think of it. I was shocked when like they pulled up my terminal on my computer because I'd seen it on other people's computers, but I thought it was something I had to go download. Like I didn't have any exposure whatsoever to kind of the mechanics of technology, and this has all been in the past 4 years for me.
Wow, that's aggressive.
Yeah.
That's super aggressive. So we touched a little bit on like technology literacy. So I want to know, have you been asked some like incredibly silly questions now that you know technology by people who don't? Like, has anyone asked you?
I'm still the one asking.
Are you?
the
Are you?
questions.
Have you
Yeah,
asked?
yeah.
You can tell me one that you've asked too. Do you get asked? I mean, you work for NASA, Chris. Like, do people ask you like really silly things sometimes? Like, how do you work while you're floating? Like, you know.
Man, I wish I worked while floating. That would be epic. Right?
Fingers
Best job
crossed.
ever. I get asked some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Like, I get asked about the flat earth sometimes, which, in
No
case you're
way.
wondering, is not a thing. The earth is round, it turns out. We've known that since Archimedes. And
You're sure?
Yeah, I mean,
Looks flat to
99%
me.
sure. Science, you know. You're right, it totally looks flat. Maybe
It's
I'm
very
wrong. I could be wrong.
really like that's a real thing that's really happened. Like not just like in passing, but like not like at like an airport bar, but like by a person you've met in your regular life.
Serious question, like, why are you trying to tell me that the earth is not flat type question? And I mad respect for the people who believe the earth is flat, but they're wrong.
Yeah, I'm honestly like I'm jealous. Like I have a hard time believing stuff, like being such a disbelieving person, and I'm just like, man, to have that kind of faith, that's got to feel super good.
Yeah, totally.
That kind of certainty.
Yeah.
Okay, any other ones? Any other really really good questions?
I get asked a lot about the aliens at Area 51.
Oh, nice.
There are no aliens at Area 51. Sorry, guys.
Well, that's because they were dead and cut up and moved elsewhere, right?
Cold storage.
Dude, do you have some? Do you get asked some pretty great stuff?
The only thing I was trying to remember one. Yeah, I think it was maybe early 2000s or something. I was already playing with like doing real-time 3D animations and stuff, so it was very exciting to like have like at the time it was like a 486 or like a Pentium displaying like a 3D scene and all real-time, and it was exciting. And I was showing it to a friend, and the friend was saying like, but why is it all pixelated? Like basically like it was low resolution back then, so it was like he was it was hard to explain. Like, yeah, it's just computers don't have a lot of resolution yet.
Yeah.
Like it somehow like it just made me like, oh, I guess I'm very like into this stuff that I cannot even see. That is just like pixels. Still like the pixel are too. It's kind of like seeing like VR at this point. That everyone is saying like, why is it pixelated?
Yeah.
Well, it's getting there. But it made me like sit back like, okay, I'm not in the same world as the people, like normal people when they see these things. But it wasn't, it was the only thing that shocked me a little bit. But it was not a stupid question though.
Yeah. It was just a question of like literacy, right?
Yes.
We're like, oh, do you have like a 4K open source library? Like that hasn't quite. We're not quite that at that point.
Yeah, like it showed the disconnect basically.
Yeah.
That I was getting into with the world.
Sarah, you got one?
What I'll say is that I work in the newsroom with like literally Pulitzer-winning journalists, and computers are really hard, and we all have our strengths. And for some of the
Yes.
reporters, computers is not their strength.
Yeah, I would imagine.
My dad once asked me, he called me frantically, and he was like, I saw something that said that the file saved to my desktop, but I can't find the desktop. Like, how do I open the file that's my desktop? And I was like, Dad, close the files, and like, that's your desktop.
Yeah.
But it was a really good moment of like, these things are hard. Like the vocabulary that we've just kind of ingrained into ourselves. Like, it's tricky when you step back and think like that's kind of a hard concept to think about a desktop and what that means, and when something says that it saves to the desktop, like
Where's that any key? When are we gonna get that thing? Gotta find that thing. So who and maybe if it was when you were younger or maybe now, but like who are some of the folks that you guys watch that you kind of not look up to, but like keep an eye on for their work and are kind of keeping you inspired and kind of driving your practice forward? Is there anybody left out there that you're like, oh, I got to keep an eye on this. This is the really good stuff.
I'm obviously partial to the news nerds community. That's what we call ourselves, the developers who work in newsrooms. There's a ton going on. I mentioned this in my talk this morning. I was just at a conference a few weeks ago in Chicago, NICAR. So I don't know what the N and the I stand for, but the National Institute, maybe. CAR is computer-assisted reporting, and there were 1,000 people there. And
Wow.
so, like, we think of the news industry as one that's dying. Please still support us. That's not the message I'm trying to send. But there's a lot of like really, really exciting stuff that's going on, and it's awesome for me to, still pretty new to this field, to be able to see kind of the other projects that are going on and the people who've been doing this a lot longer than I have.
Cool. What do you do? I mean, you're making the tools and doing the stuff. Are there folks using your tools where you're like, how did they do that? Like, do you ever get kind of like competitive with your fans?
It is getting, that's actually an exciting time whenever you see someone doing something with what you've built and you don't know how they're doing it. Mm-hmm. But in general, I can kind of guess how they're doing it because I see them. I know the options that there are. But because I came from this demo scene world, that somehow... that's the thing that's still happening, and there's people that are still competing, and they're still like showing like this is what I managed to do in this space, and this is what I managed to do, like put music, and the music like sounds like this and that. So that is the thing that since I started doing that thing I started to be involved in that world in '93, something like that. Mm-hmm. And since then, there's still every year there's something new that is impressive and kind of keeps you going and say like, oh, this is a very impressive use of the computer, the kind of thing that you can do with the computer. And sometimes they open like new fields of like doing different kind of like rendering techniques and stuff out of these kind of explorations. It's because people are not, they're just like playing with the computer and trying to like explore the things that can be done. And that's like without having to like sell it to something, or like they're trying to compete with each other. Not trying to like do something for a client or something like that. Okay. So out of that, those competitions, sometimes they figure out things that they wouldn't figure out in other ways. But yeah, that world, I still find it. Always keep an eye on it and see like what are the new things that they have done, and try to like try to learn from that. But yeah, and yeah, like over these years, like in these kind of conferences and FITC and off, there's always all the Joshua Davis and G-Mang and all these people that are all also like trying to like really push the software limits and do things that are always surprising, and not only like in a technical level, but like visual level, but also storytelling and all these things. So I keep an eye on all the creative people that way, and also technical. Yeah.
Would you say you're stalking them?
Only people.
Okay, cool. What about you, Chris?
So you actually stole my answer because that's what I was going to say.
The demo scene too?
Yeah, totally. The people here are a huge inspiration for me. When I come to FITC events, I meet the most brilliant people. I've met a lot of you guys, and I'm so impressed with all of the creativity and the thought that's put into it. And then also, all of my original heroes are still my heroes, right? Emily Oberman is still doing amazing things. And I got to meet Alan Cooper, who literally wrote the book, the first book, on interface design. And he was the kindest, nicest person, and he gave hugs and invited me to his ranch. And, like, when you meet your heroes, and they're really good people, in addition to being brilliant, it's just the most amazing thing. And that's how I feel about here.
That answer was so sweet. We're going to be done now. No, just kidding. It was really, really sweet, though, and I really loved it. I'm curious, I think there's an illusion that I think a lot of folks have once you get to a point where you're doing talks that you, like, super have your shit together, right? And, like, I don't know about you guys, but, like, there's a lot of stuff that I worry about. And especially in a career where things are changing so rapidly, where I'm having to keep up with clients' expectations and changes in cultural psychology and, like, all the tools on top of that, what are some of the things that each of you worry about as far as kind of driving you forward? Anything that jumps out?
I've been struggling a little bit. Like, I'm not, like, a lot of people that speak in these events are almost professionally speakers. They plan the whole presentation and they have a message and inspiration notes and stuff. And I that's not what I do. I'm a programmer, and basically what I do is sharing what I have done over the last 3 years, or like since the previous talk or something like that. And somehow that understanding that is just not trying to be like them, not trying to be like having to have like amazing slides and like having like a very like good delivery of all the message. Trying to not to be like that and just to, this is what I do. I'm going to share what I've done. Hopefully, if someone gets inspired by it, someone wants to like follow it or do something with it, then that's good. But otherwise, I will stress to be what I'm not, and that helped me to like keep talking. I guess.
Oh, that's great.
So I suffer from imposter syndrome, like so much. It's crazy. And I'm also shy, which I know is probably hard to believe, but I'm actually terrified. I can get up here and talk to a crowd, but then I have to get off the stage and talk to individual people, and that scares the crap out of me. And so I spend a lot of time wondering if I'm going to say a really stupid thing that insults somebody or quote a fact wrong, because I do that a lot, or just basically forget the word book or something like that. I spend a lot of time worried about that.
The quote a fact wrong is really, that speaks to me definitely in my industry. I spend a lot of time worrying about the fact that I'm very new to both news and technology, and yet I found myself at this job that is the intersection of both. I have to remind myself that, like, I got the job because I can speak at the intersection of both. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are much better software engineers than me, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who are a lot better reporters than me, but can they go back and forth? Like, that's where I kind of have to remind myself that I can do that. But, I mean, we are just constantly, and this isn't a bad thing. I was going to say we're constantly scrutinized with the reporting that we put out. That's a good thing. I want to kind of make sure I emphasize that, but it is very stressful. And I'm in the process of a story right now with a reporter. I was kind of helping out with the data analysis on it. It was supposed to run in November, and we're still kind of figuring out from every single angle, can we poke holes in this because we want to make sure it's solid before it runs. I don't know if it's ever going to, I'm sure it'll run at some point. But I spend a lot of time thinking about, from all different angles, from all different perspectives, how could this be criticized? And if we still continue to find ways, then we don't run the story, and we work to resolve those issues.
That's amazing. I mean, November to April, in
That's
like a
short. What I'm learning in like these kind of long investigative projects. Yeah.
That's impressive. That's very impressive. So one of the things you kind of mentioned in passing, Chris, was your daughter. You're studying with her. And that's always such an interesting thing to me, folks that have, really aggressive careers and really big careers, is balancing that family piece. So I'm curious, kind of with each of you, how you think about kind of that home life and that work life. I know we say, work-life balance, and that makes sense for a person who's like building birdhouses at the birdhouse factory. But when you choose like a creative career and, code inside of that, technology inside of that, you are your life's work. You are building the legacy of the idea children that you're having and that you're shepherding through the universe as much as you're building your actual family. So without getting into the cliche of work-life balance and how many hours you spend on both, how do you think about the division of your time and priorities? How does that fit for you? I mean, I think, do you guys have kids, Sarah? So as our mom, not to token you a bit, but how was that when you decided to have a family?
Well, I didn't decide to have a family. It happened. Oops. And
When you decided to keep your family.
I did. I made a choice. Yay. And I was single, so I didn't have a partner. And what happened was my daughter and I kind of worked together. I roped her into my work as much as I could. She and I would sketch together, and I don't think that I made all the best choices. I would probably do it very differently if I had to go back. But the great thing is, when I finally did get married to a wonderful man who's in the back, I chose a creative to marry so that he would understand that for me there's no boundary between work and life, that I might get up in the middle of the night and go sketch or go code something up because I had this idea and I need to get it down before I lose it. And he's the same way. He makes things for a living, and so he gets it, and he understands that I'm going to leave my project on the table for a week while I work on it, and he's cool with that, I think. He hasn't left me yet.
That understanding is so, I think, elusive to people when they're, trying to make family and even make the family that they come from understand. Because there's always going to be sacrifice and decisions that we have to make, I see a lot of nodding, Mr. Ricardo, Ms. Sarah. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Oh,
You first.
I obviously work in an industry that's nonstop, but I really appreciate the fact that my boss, who's a man, sets very good examples for me, because I'm relatively young and I want a family one day, and I think it's important for those of you out there who manage to set the example for the people who you manage. My boss has two young daughters. They're toddlers, and he makes it very clear, even in this industry that's obviously nonstop, he makes it very clear that his family is a priority to him, and is just always talking about the books that they're reading and the parks that they're going to and the meals that they're making for dinner, and it's different for me, I think, and it's different than a lot of other software engineering roles I imagine I could be in, to have a boss who's setting this example that family is important to him. That's what I've got.
To her point, I think what you guys were talking, I think it's important to be with someone that understands what you do. Sometimes you may be with someone that's more into I think there's kind of family people and work people, and if you're with a family person that wants that their goal is to build a family, but it's really judgmental, you're working too much, but we should do more things together, these kind of things. That it's better when you're with someone that really understands what you do to not get stressed too much about it. But in my case, I'm very bad at still finding good work balance, because at the same time, it's the same thing. It's not. I guess whenever you find the thing that you like, it's not really so much work anymore. It's just something that you do, and it's very difficult to not do it because it's fun to do that thing. It's like either watch TV or work because it's as fun. And also it's even worse in my case because I can work with my phone. So I don't like what I'm doing these days. Like before on the People Talk, I was just at some point I just took my phone and there was some open source on the open source project that I work at. That there was anyone submitting some code that I should need to take a look at it and approve it. And yeah, that's all I had to do. I just look at the code. I'm like, yeah, this looks good. I approve. Thank you. And then I work for a little bit. This is what I do like these days. So because I don't need to have like a whole computer or anything, I can just do it from any minutes to do it. But so it's even harder to do the separation because it's checking news, work, checking news, looking at the world, work.
Do you think people knew you were just sitting there working?
Say it again.
Do you think people knew you were just sitting there working? Do you think Mike knew? Because he knows.
I'm listening. I'm listening too. But however, I recently started to try to not do that on weekends.
Yeah.
Because on GitHub you can see basically all the days that you work. It shows like a color for every day. Like if it's like green, like yep, that day I worked. So I'm trying to make weekends blank, basically.
Yeah, it's important.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
One thing that I really value about where I'm at now is that I'm on a team that values comp time, and I think this is huge. So, for example, my team's the team that is in charge of Olympics data. So, last month or 2 months ago, whenever it was, we were pulling all-night shifts, making sure that the data was funneled to the graphics department, and they were then going to make all their cool stuff with it. Same with elections. It's midterm season, and there's going to be a lot of very long Tuesday nights. I'm really grateful to be on a team that says, we understand that this is part of the job, block off these nights because you're going to be working late, but then also make sure that you block off some time to make up for that.
I'm curious, too, a little bit, with you in particular and people kind of understanding what you do. How did, your non-technical friends or your family react to the fact that you made a robot that poops?
This will forever be my legacy. I didn't make a robot that poops, but I did make a bot. This was when I was in Vermont at the public radio station. What else are you going to do in Vermont? I made a sewage bot. So it was connected to the state's database of sewage overflows. So anytime the state reported a sewage overflow, my bot would tweet. We decided to make it a Twitter account because I wanted this to be kind of public. Originally, I was working with a reporter, and originally we were thinking, let's just do this email notification system. And this was purely selfish for him because he would spend his days actually manually refreshing the database to see if anything had changed because there's a lot of stories in the sewage. The water infrastructure is fascinating, especially in older states. Anyway, we automated this. We made it public. It led to the state changing legislation to require faster notification of sewage spills, and the poop bot will forever be the poop bot.
Incredible. But do people understand what it actually did? I really love the explanation of it, and I think it was really important. But I think to how I worded the question and to what it actually was. Is there Aunt Sally was you made a robot that poops. Why'd you have to do that? Was there any of that in your life?
I think the hardest part, and
what's the Twitters? Those, you know what I mean? Aunt June that's never heard of that. Does she think you have robots just shitting all over New York?
No, I hope not. For me, the hardest part is the fact that I'm on a very poorly named team. I'm on what's called the Interactive News Technologies team. And you think of that and you think oh, the New York Times, Interactive News, you must be the team that produces the news that's interactive because that's what would make sense. And in fact, that's very far from the truth. We work very closely with the graphics department, but they are called the graphics department. We should just give them the name. But my team, Interactive News, what we do is we are tasked with finding and telling the stories that without software we could not find and tell. So it's a lot of behind-the-scenes work. We have a whole sub-team that's tools and templates, and then I'm on the news gathering and research team.
Cool. So one of the things that I found in my practice, and last year for me was a big year of really talking about and looking and examining, inquiring around my practice of how I get to the finished work. Was, managing my time and making time for the fact that I'm an epic procrastinator, and that's part of my practice. And inside that procrastination are all of my hobbies and chores of my life. And from what I've learned, you guys have some pretty interesting hobbies. I know, Chris, you're an aspiring science fiction writer. How much of this is happening? Like, do you make time to write consistently? Are you publishing? Is the pilot coming?
So the novel's coming eventually. I do a couple of things. The first is I participate in NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. This happens in November. And yes, you can write a whole novel in 1 month. It really can be done. Thank goodness my husband is patient during Novembers. And then also I'm a member of a writers group. So every other Wednesday, I am going and critiquing other writers and being inspired by them and being critiqued by them in turn. And it really helps to keep me motivated and to have that schedule where Wednesdays belong to writing.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't write as often as I should or as much as I should. And if I want to be good, I have to write like 10 million words. So I'm a long way from that. But I try, and with the rigor and the schedule, it helps.
Yeah.
I love that. I have long believed that writers' workshops are the best way to learn how to give and take feedback. I grew up in creative writing classes and then took a bunch in college too, yeah.
Good for designers too. I mean, the way you learn to critique a story is very similar to the way you learn to critique a design, and giving and receiving feedback is a key skill.
Yeah, it's a critical skill, unless you're going to work by yourself because you're Mr. Doob and you're just that good. Unless you're just that good.
And there's no hobbies.
Do you have any hobby? Do you have a reptile, lizard, a cat, anything in your life? Or is it just all code all day?
I play games sometimes, but the problem was...
What kind of game? Like computer games? Like board games? Like LARP? What are you doing?
Yeah, like PlayStation games or whatever. But it's just, everything just became all the same thing. It's just a problem whenever your hobbies... The demos and stuff used to be my hobby. And now that became my work, kind of.
Yeah.
So then it's now I don't have a hobby anymore. I don't know. I'm actually trying to find more things to do.
Are you auditioning hobbies right now?
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions?
Ballroom dancing, number one.
I'll try it.
For sure. You could become a magician. I know an assistant that would be very well trained for you.
I do travel though.
Do you travel a lot?
Yeah.
Would you consider, when you travel, do you just go to a new place and sit and code, or?
And on the way too, yeah.
Do you go see stuff? Do you go to museums?
Yeah.
Is food a hobby for you?
Until last year, I was traveling for 4 years nonstop.
Nonstop, no house, just travel.
Basically, yeah.
Total nomad.
Yeah, I think it was something like 30 different Airbnbs.
That's awesome.
Working on all of them, yeah.
And yes, you're just working in a new place.
But yeah, it was more because I didn't know. It got to a point that I didn't know where I wanted to live.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see the world, to see all the places and all the cultures.
Did you wind up back where you started, or did you find a new place to live?
I decided to go to San Francisco, which was the closest to where I grew up in Barcelona.
Okay.
And also I had opportunities that I needed.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I did this before. I was living in London, so it was after London I went back to Spain, and then I was not really happy, coming back to the beginning again, kind of as if I never went to London. Yeah. And then I did that. But that's basically traveling.
Okay. Well, I'm sure if anybody has any hobby suggestions in the San Francisco area to give to Mr. Doob, he's looking for new hobbies. And Sarah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was on a skee ball team last fall.
Really?
Highly recommend. We lost every single game, but somehow still we made it to playoffs.
There's skee ball playoffs? What? Do you have jerseys?
We lost in 8 minutes. We had T-shirts.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you tap dance?
I took a class. I always like to be taking some kind of random bizarre class, or doing some random bizarre thing. So yeah, I took a tap dancing class. I took a printmaking class, which was not super random but really fun. And it was such a great release at the end of the day, after staring at a computer all day, to go make a mess at this studio that was not really my responsibility to clean up at the end of the, obviously whip down my spot, but it was very cathartic. And then, I joined the skee ball team. I'm on a soccer team now. We just won our first game.
No big deal.
Cool. Yeah. I'm like a big fan of.
That means you're
always-
undefeated if you won your first game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're on an undefeated
Yeah.
soccer
I was on a
team.
very much defeated skee ball team, so this
Yeah,
is good.
but you're currently on an undefeated soccer
This
team.
is true.
Own
Well,
it for
actually,
like
there
until
was
the
a-
next game.
There was a game yesterday, and I don't know how we did, but I missed
You're
it.
undefeated.
I am undefeated.
That's it. Own it.
Big fan of like trying out new classes. It's a great way to meet people too. Like I've done a lot of moving, just like geographically, and I think it's a really great way to kind of meet people. Like, oh, I took a laser cutting class. That was awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
What's like the weirdest class?
probably the tap dancing.
Probably probably tapping.
It was like a bunch
I don't
of
know.
like 40-year-old moms, and it was actually genius. If you want the like world-winning idea here, start a dance studio for like both kids and their parents, so that the parents don't just have to like sit in the lobby. So I was like tap dancing with a bunch of the moms of the toddlers.
That
It
sounds.
was really fun.
I mean, if you're looking for moms, dude, that could be a really good one. You know.
21 is not a toddler anymore.
I have no appropriate follow-ups to that. So I'm curious too. I think we're getting close to the end here. So I'm gonna like throw out all my more difficult, complicated for my brain questions. I'm curious about how you deal with conflict. I think we talk about such great triumphant stories while we're doing talks and things like that. Are you, each of you, like, are you a person that, like, goes in and you're like, let's sort out this conflict? Do you, like, fire clients, not read emails, Xerox somebody's picture and pee on it? Like, what kind of stuff do you go into? I mean, Mr. Dube, you work for
Right.
yourself. Are all your clients just, like, the best ever? Do you just have the best time all the time?
That's the thing, like I don't really have clients, but I have a lot of people that I don't know that come, basically like whenever you do open source stuff, you get a lot of random people over the internet that they send submissions. So like, here's the code, what do you think about it? Or they ask for features. And actually I have to daily, I deal with a lot of conflict with people that will send some code and I'll have some like, I'll have to say like, well, doesn't fit with the project, or like, maybe can you improve it this way? Maybe they're going to be like, no, I'm not going to do anything, whether you use it or you don't use it. And there's a lot of fights over the internet.
Really?
And sometimes fights between people that are in the community. So basically, whenever you are like fairly successful doing an open source project, you end up having a community that people are looking up to you. And if sometimes you may say something that is going to hurt someone, you have to be very careful. And that's kind of what you have to pay whenever you do open source stuff. And a lot of people that they do open source stuff, they don't want to have they don't want to have to deal with people, but that's what you had to pay with it. But luckily, I think I'm pretty patient, and it's fine whenever someone is attacking to me by saying like, oh, they say something about like whatever my decision was or something. But I only have problems whenever is one user or contributor that is attacking another contributor. That is, I had to step into that and kind of deal with those things. But there's a lot of
Do you get into it? Like, do you get in and like insert yourself inside these like the squabbles of the forums and things?
Yeah, basically, it's all written. I only had to go there and say like, please be respectful of this person or the other person. Or sometimes I will have to ban people that are just like unrespectful to people. And it's
what was
difficult.
like the first banning? Was it like really bad? Like, how did you know like the first time where you're like, oh, this is it, I gotta ban them.
But I wouldn't remember. But like, what's funny? Well, just people that are, you had to consider their upbringing or their social space or why they're thinking the way, or or maybe they're not aware that they're just being unrespectful to the other person, or they just feel entitled to whatever. But like, it just gets to a point that after telling them like, please be respectful, or like, this is, it's what is called in open source is burning. A lot of like open source people get burned down burned up because it's this kind of thing, like people that don't appreciate the time that you're spending, or they just ask things from you. So these kind of people, you have to like be careful and be like, please be respectful. And if they are not, then eventually like, well, I'll ban you. And then eventually they actually just going to change their name and come back again. but you keep doing that, and somehow they become more respectful and more appreciative somehow. But it's a weird environment. It's a weird, like, it's like kind of working with all these people, but I don't really see them. They're just like saying random things, and I go back one by one, responding all the things. There's a lot of conflict in that world.
I've never thought about like a banned user being like reincarnated with better karma and coming back to a platform.
Actually, the band user, the new name that he picked was Mr. Noob. I can see what you're doing. Like, that's funny, but then I unbanned him again, and then he go back to the first name.
Okay.
It's internet.
Yeah, that sounds not fun. Yeah. Do we have any quick stories from either of you as far as the conflict and things like that?
Yeah, so I deal with conflict all the time, and I am like Spock's grandma when I deal with it. I just like ignore all the emotion, because emotion gets you nowhere in the middle of a conflict. Mm-hmm. And I deal with the facts, and I bake them banana bread. And if you don't listen to me after I bake you banana bread, you're probably a cause I can't win. Unless you're allergic to bananas, in which case I bake you chocolate chip cookies. I mean, there's a baking for everyone.
Gluten-free.
I can do it.
Amazing. I'm going to get in a fight with you so I can get some banana bread.
I mean, I guess what I'll add is that I think conflict is something that you just have to, it's different every time, and you just have to kind of learn the best way to resolve it in that moment, and then kind of take from that the lessons that you will then apply to the next time.
Excellent. We are out of time. Thank you guys so much for sitting with me today. Thank you guys for all joining us for our chat today. Phenomenal, and enjoy the rest of your final FITC day.